The wedding to my childhood sweetheart, Victoria, proceeded as planned. But the man escorting her down the aisle wasn't her father, Walter Sterling. It was her male secretary, Ethan Chandler. "Victoria," Ethan murmured, loud enough for me to hear. "You're pregnant, and in those heels. You must be extra careful." Victoria leaned her entire weight on Ethan, looking at me matter-of-factly. "Ethan saved my life. While I can't marry him, I promised him I'd give him a child." She placed a hand on her stomach. "When the baby is born, you are to love it as if it were your own flesh and blood." A wave of murmurs swept through the stunned guests, their expressions a mixture of shock and disbelief. My parents, Robert and Margaret Clark, looked horrified. They grabbed my arm, ready to leave, insisting we wouldn't stand for this humiliation. My soon-to-be parents-in-law, Walter and Eleanor Sterling, rushed over, urging me to think of the bigger picture, to just get through the ceremony first. Seeing the utter lack of concern on Victoria's face and the challenging glint in Ethan's eyes, I laughed. A cold, hard laugh. I ripped the boutonniere from my tuxedo lapel and tossed it contemptuously at Ethan. Then, forcing a smile at Victoria, I said, "Chiant, how can the child's biological parents not have a proper wedding? Today I'll just be a spectator. The role of groom is yours, Ethan. Congratulations on your shotgun wedding." And with that I began to clap, leading the applause into the stunned silence. Chapter 1. The entire room was frozen. Victoria's face darkened. "Sincere Clark, this is our wedding day. Do you absolutely have to make a scene?" She had the audacity to say I was making a scene at my wedding. She was shamelessly clinging to Ethan Chandler, brazenly announcing she was carrying his child, and demanding I raise it as my own. What did she take me for? As for her claim that Ethan had saved her life, laughable. He took her to the hospital for a common cold, some life-saving act. Did she think I was an idiot? I snatched the microphone from the master of ceremonies. "Thank you all, dear friends and family, for coming today," I announced, my voice ringing clear. "There's been a slight, unexpected change of plans. But don't worry, the wedding will proceed shortly. We just have a different groom." I gestured towards Victoria and Ethan. "The happy couple is celebrating a shotgun wedding today. Let's give them our blessings." Dead silence. Victoria glared, her face a thundercloud. Her parents' expressions were a grotesque mixture of panic and fury. Ignoring them completely, I walked over to my parents, managing a strained smile. "Dad, Mom, let's go home." Guilt washed over me. They had lived respectable lives, never enduring such public shame, and it was all because of me. My mother, Margaret, took my hand, her expression pained. My father, Robert, stood tall. He first bowed deeply to our side of the guests. "I've arranged for another banquet elsewhere," he announced, his voice firm despite the circumstances. "Your wedding gifts will be returned. Today's meal is on me." Seeing my father bow, a man I'd always known as strong-willed and rarely yielding, brought a lump to my throat and tears to my eyes, all because of me. Though Victoria and I were childhood sweethearts, my parents had never approved of our relationship. I'd argued fiercely with them about it countless times. I used to think they were prejudiced against her. Only now did I realize how perceptive they were, seeing long ago that Victoria wasn't someone worthy of spending a life with. And how foolish I was, believing she loved me as much as I loved her, thinking I couldn't marry anyone else growing up together. I fell for Victoria during our teenage years. I followed her quietly, watching her every move. For 15 years, such a long time, even a heart of stone should have softened. But Victoria hadn't. She always kept me at arm's length, playing hot and cold, flirting with other men. Every time I saw it, I'd get angry. But like a moth to a flame, I'd always find myself drawn back to her, knowing I'd get burned, yet unable to turn away. I thought eventually she'd see my devotion and love me wholeheartedly. Reality slapped me hard across the face. She had been fooling around with her own secretary, gotten pregnant, and chose our wedding day, in front of my parents and everyone we knew, to humiliate me, without a single thought for my feelings. She never had me in her heart. I could sacrifice my pride for her, revolve my world around her. I could have explosive arguments with my parents for her, but she couldn't even grant me the dignity of an untainted wedding ceremony. Watching her cling to Ethan's arm, her other hand gently caressing her belly, I felt suffocated. Since she scorned my love, trampled it underfoot, ground it into the dirt, then I would stop loving her. Just as my parents and our guests began to move, Eleanor Sterling grabbed my mother's arm. "Margaret, dear, what are you doing? It's the children's big day. We can't let outsiders laugh at us." Walter Sterling chimed in, addressing my father. "Exactly. Victoria made a mistake, yes. Scold her, teach her a lesson if you must. But these are matters for the young couple to sort out. We elders should just observe." My mother scoffed. "Observe what? More humiliation? Our family's reputation is in tatters today." My father remained silent, looking at me, leaving the decision in my hands. Victoria walked up to me, Ethan still at her side. Her eyes were cold. "Have you had enough? Do you need to completely disgrace Uncle Robert and Auntie Margaret before you're satisfied?" Her words struck me as so bitterly. Ironic, I let out a wretched laugh. Who exactly was disgracing my parents? Was it me? Ethan looked at me apologetically. "And Mr. Clark, I am truly sorry. When I first heard you and Victoria were getting married, I wished you nothing but happiness, but..." He glanced at Victoria's stomach. "But I didn't expect Victoria to get pregnant. I made a mistake and I'll accept any punishment. But the child is innocent. I can't let the baby be rejected from birth." He fixed his gaze on me. "Mr. Clark, you're a kind-hearted man. Surely you wouldn't want to see an innocent child suffer, right?" Before I could respond, my mother pointed a trembling finger at Ethan and erupted. "What incredible nerve skin as thick as a castle wall you and Victoria were sneaking around behind my son's back, even conceived a child, and you have the gall to show up at his wedding playing the victim. I have never met anyone as shameless as you." Eleanor quickly tried to placate my mother. "Margaret, please calm down. He does have a point, you know. The child is innocent." She turned to me. "Sincere, wouldn't you agree? Who are you calling Margaret, dear? My son will have absolutely nothing to do with your daughter from this day forward." My mother shot back. "Son, let's go. We're not going through with this wedding. Let this happy family of three have their reunion." She yanked her arm free from Eleanor's grasp. Eleanor's face fell. Margaret, what kind of talk is that?" "All our friends and relatives are watching. We can't just act on impulse like youngsters." She looked back at me pleadingly. "Sincere, you always see the bigger picture. Talk some sense into your mother. We can't let our relatives and friends witness such a fiasco." Victoria spoke up coldly. "Sincere, even though I'm carrying Ethan's child, since you love me, you should accept everything about me. So what if the child isn't yours? It's a minor issue. Once the baby is born, you'll still be its father. I just don't understand. Is biology really that important?" She was actually blaming me, as if my refusal to accept her child with Ethan was some heinous crime. The sheer absurdity made me laugh again, this time laced with fury. Walter Sterling glanced from Ethan to me. "Sincere, Eleanor and I have watched you grow up. We know the kind of man you are. What's done is done. Making a bigger scene won't help. We need to focus on damage control." I turned my head, asking calmly, "How do you propose we control the damage?" Walter didn't hesitate. "Finish the wedding first. We can't become a laughingstock. Let Victoria have the baby. Abortion is hard on the body after all. But don't worry," he added quickly, "and the child will have nothing to do with Ethan once it's born. You will be the father. We'll give Ethan a sum of money and make him disappear." Eleanor immediately chimed in. Yes, that's an excellent plan." Ethan smiled thinly. "I have no objections, Mr. Clark. It was my fault to begin with. It's only right that you raise the child as your own. Once I receive the money, I promise I will never appear before you, Victoria, or the child ever again." A cold sneer touched my lips. "Of course, you have no objections. You get a pile of cash, and someone else raises your kid for free. Anyone would be laughing in their sleep over a deal like that." Victoria spoke impatiently. "Sincere, my parents have laid it all out. What are you still being difficult about? So if I didn't know you were head over heels in love with me, I wouldn't even be marrying you in the first place. Then, as you wish. Let's not get married." "What did you say?" Victoria stared, incredulous. My mother cheered. "Yes, that's my good son." Walter and Eleanor panicked. "Sincere, marriage is a serious matter. You can't just call it off like this. Don't be impulsive." Walter shot Victoria a furious glare. "What nonsense are you spouting? Get over there and stand aside." Victoria shot me a resentful look before angrily pulling Ethan away with her. Walter and Eleanor turned back to persuade me. I looked at them. Growing up, I'd respected them deeply, almost like my own parents. I couldn't believe that today they weren't siding with me at all. Their only thought was to make me marry Victoria and raise Ethan's child. Seeing they couldn't sway me, Eleanor turned her attention to my mother. "Margaret, please talk to Sincere. Even if you don't consider us, think about him calling off a wedding halfway through. It will damage Sincere's reputation and your family's." I scoffed. "Reputation? Do we even have any reputation left after today?" My words made Walter and Eleanor flinch, though they quickly composed themselves. "Sincere, you can't put it like that. None of us wanted this to happen," Walter said smoothly. "Yes," Eleanor added, feigning distress. "And now that it's happened, we're suffering too. You have to understand our position." "Stop playing the victim," my mother retorted, her face etched with disgust. "Your daughter cheats before the wedding, and you two are no better. Just as shameless." She grabbed my arm again. "Let's go." I shook my head gently. "Oh, Mom, not just yet. This isn't over." I turned back to Walter and Eleanor. "You knew about Victoria and Ethan all along, didn't you? You conspired together to hide it from me, aiming to create a fait accompli with the marriage so you could manipulate me later? No wonder you pushed us to get legally registered before the wedding ceremony. Quite the calculating move." Eleanor was still trying to justify it. "Sincere, really, we did it for you too. You love Victoria so deeply, it's just one child. If you just pretended not to know, you could have married her, fulfilling your lifelong dream. You should be happy." "Happy? Bullshit, happy my foot." My mother was practically vibrating with rage. "Your whole family schemed together to deceive my son. How can such a shameless family exist in this world?" Eleanor dropped the pretense, a smug look crossing her face. "It's too late for regrets now. Sincere and Victoria are legally married. Divorce means splitting half the assets." Walter looked at me and my parents, a triumphant smirk playing on his lips. "Advise you to think carefully. Half of the Clark family fortune is no small sum. Beside them," Victoria laughed openly. "Sincere, it's just a child. It's not like we can't afford to raise it. This was just a small matter, but you had to blow it out of proportion. Why make such a scene? Pun, you shut up." My mother, red-faced with anger, lunged towards Victoria as if to silence her physically. I held my mother back, looking at the smug Sterling family trio with a cold smile. "So, you think you have me cornered? Sorry to disappoint you." I pulled out the marriage certificate and threw it on the floor. "This marriage certificate is fake." The triumphant expressions on Walter and Eleanor's faces froze. Victoria shrieked, "Impossible, how can the certificate be fake? I went with you to get it myself. It has the official seal, it can't be fake." She scrambled to pick up her copy, pointing frantically at the seal. I sneered. "And just because it has a seal doesn't mean it's real. Didn't you know seals can be forged? On you." Victoria pointed a trembling finger at me. "You tricked me, you bastard." My expression turned icy. "So you could cheat before the wedding and get pregnant. Why couldn't I trick you? And you and your parents planned to use the marriage certificate to control me, to take half my family's wealth to bail out your failing company. Am I right?" Victoria stared at me, shocked. "You knew." "Oh, yes. Lucky for me I did. Otherwise I'd be completely at your mercy right now." Victoria gritted her teeth. "Forging an official seal is illegal. Do you believe I won't call the police?" "Tona, go ahead," I said, completely unafraid. It would be a perfect opportunity to report today's events as well. Let everyone see just how despicable and shameless your family is. Worst case, I spend a few years in jail. But your family and the company you're clinging to, you'll be ruined, utterly. My willingness to burn everything down silenced Victoria. Walter slapped her hard across the face. "Useless, can't even handle one simple thing." Victoria clutched her cheek, staring at me with pure hatred. Eleanor's voice was laced with venom. "Sincere Clark, you hid this very well. You knew about Victoria and Ethan all along, didn't you?" I offered a bland smile. "I don't know what you're talking about. Stop pretending if you didn't know. Why wouldn't you have gotten legally married to Victoria for real?" Eleanor hissed, her eyes red with fury. "You call our family despicable and shameless? You're no better knowing everything but pretending ignorance. You're more vicious than any of us." Hearing this, I laughed coldly. "If you hadn't been scheming against me, backing me into a corner every step of the way, would things have ended up like this? Aunt, ultimately, this is because you had malicious intentions." "Until well said." My mother beamed, laughing with relief. "Good son, that was brilliant." I smiled back, then turned my gaze to the devastated faces of Walter and Eleanor. Victoria glared at me hatefully. "Sincere, it must have been so hard for you, knowing everything, yet putting on an act. Living behind a mask every day must be exhausting, right?" I smiled faintly. "Not as exhausting as you, surely. Juggling Ethan's affections while pretending with me, scheming with your parents behind my back. You practically had to split yourself in three. Probably didn't get much sleep." "Tisk, tisk. Just thinking about it makes me pity you." "Enough, you bastard. Just you wait, this isn't over between us." Victoria spat fiercely. I shrugged dismissively. "Without the constraint of marriage, what can you possibly do? Let me offer some advice. Instead of plotting revenge against me, you should focus on your pregnancy. If something happens to the baby, will Ethan still love you? Will he stick around?" Ethan's expression flickered. He quickly plastered on a reassuring smile for Victoria. "Darling, I love you. Even if you weren't carrying my child, I would still love you. Oh, Ethan, of course I know how good you are." Victoria looked deeply moved, then shot me a cold glare. "Not like this bastard," she sneered. "Claims to love me, but secretly investigates me, plots against me, refused to sleep with me before marriage. Knew my family's company was in crisis but wouldn't help. Just kept saying he'd step in at the critical moment. I bet he wanted to swallow our company whole. He talks about me cheating before marriage. Is he himself so clean?" Her words didn't faze me much, but my mother was furious again. "How much has our family helped yours over the years? It's your own mismanagement. Stop blaming everyone else." My father's face was grim. I gently held my mother back. "Oh, let her say whatever she wants. It doesn't actually hurt us." My mother was still fuming. I squeezed her hand. "All right, we've wasted enough time here. Let's go. Our friends and relatives are waiting." "Wait!" Walter called out urgently. "After the mess you've made of this wedding today, you can't just walk away." I turned back, a cold smile playing on my lips. "What? You want us to pay damages?" Walter's voice was icy. "I don't need your money. What I need is your oath that not a word of what happened today gets out. If our family is ruined, don't think yours will get off easy. If we go down, we'll drag everyone down with us." Hearing this, I glanced at Victoria, still glaring daggers at me, then at Ethan, head bowed, his expression shifting rapidly. I let out a short, sharp laugh. "You should be more worried about your own daughter and your future son-in-law." Without waiting for Victoria's already darkening expression to change further, I turned and walked out of the banquet hall with my parents and our guests. The second banquet began. My parents told me to mingle with my friends while they took care of the relatives. Sincere, my buddy Ben Miller, waved me over. I walked towards him, forcing a smile. Sincere, man, what you did back there was absolutely brilliant. Ben was practically buzzing with excitement. Seeing Victoria and her parents furious but totally helpless against you, so satisfying. I told you long ago Victoria Sterling wasn't good enough for you. Look how much you did for her, and what did she ever do? Besides ordering you around like a servant? Sincere, you've got money, looks. You're the city's top bachelor. I never understood why you were so obsessed with her, like she'd put a spell on you. Maybe I was just stupid. I smiled faintly, raising my glass. Let's not talk about her. From now on, she's her, I'm me. We have absolutely nothing to do with each other. That's the spirit. Ben raised his glass and clinked it against mine. After the banquet ended, my mother and I helped my father out. I hadn't drunk much. A woman who never loved me wasn't worth it. My father, however, had drunk heavily. All because of me. It was my fault he lost face in front of friends and family. My fault he had to bow his head for the first time I could remember. Thinking of all the years I argued with him because of Victoria filled me with immense guilt. I had been unfilial. Son, my mother said firmly as we walked, don't you dare have second thoughts and go back to Victoria. If you do, even I will lose respect for you. I quickly reassured her I wouldn't. One heartbreak was enough. There wouldn't be a second time. Just as Mom and I helped Dad into the underground parking garage, we ran into Victoria and Ethan. Victoria waved her hand disdainfully in front of her nose. Oh, you reek of alcohol. How much did you drink? Because of me, right? If you regret it now, it's not too late. Her words were so narcissistic I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Where did she get such colossal self-importance? Victoria's face hardened. What are you laughing at? Nothing. I forced down my laughter, waving a dismissive hand. Pregnant women shouldn't be around strong alcohol fumes. You're carrying Ethan's child, remember? You should probably leave quickly. Victoria huffed coldly. Ethan spoke up. Darling, I have a few words I want to say to Mr. Clark. Why don't you wait for me in the car? Victoria frowned. What's there to say to him? Full-on, be good, Ethan said, patting her head affectionately. Hey, you messed up my hair, Victoria complained, but her face was flushed with pleasure. I felt nauseous watching them. On Sincere Clark, I'm warning you, Victoria said sharply before leaving. Mind you, if you dare do anything to hurt Ethan, I will never forgive you. She turned and walked away. I told my mother to take Dad to the car first, then turned to Ethan. All right, what did you want to say to me? Ethan smiled. Mr. Clark, I know you still love Victoria. I can give her back to you. Hearing this, my hand, already in my pocket, quietly activated the voice recorder on my phone. For this amount, Ethan held up 2 fingers. 20 million. It's not much. Once I get the money, not only will I persuade Victoria to abort the child, but I'll disappear forever. I'll never come between you and her again. You can marry her, live happily ever after. I nodded slowly. Sounds tempting. Ethan's face lit up. So you agree? I chuckled softly. 20 million really isn't much. But I have a question. If Victoria finds out you sold her out for 20 million, won't she go berserk? Ethan scoffed. Whether she goes berserk or not has nothing to do with me. All I want is the money. And let me tell you, I only slept with her for the money. I thought getting her pregnant meant I could marry her, inherit the Sterling Company eventually. But then she says she can't marry me and her parents didn't say a damn thing. If I can't marry her, can't inherit the company, and can't get any money, why should I let her order me around anymore? Since she and her parents made it sound so nice. Wait until after you marry Sincere. Get the money to save the company, we won't treat you unfairly. Now look, the goose that laid the golden eggs is gone. Of course, I have to look out for myself now. What about the child? Don't you care about it at all? I asked coldly. Ethan looked completely indifferent. And San, barely look after myself, why worry about a kid? My hand tightened around the phone in my pocket. Aren't you afraid I'll tell Victoria what you just said? Ethan burst out laughing. She doesn't trust you at all. Even if you spin the most elaborate tale, it won't mean a thing compared to one word from me. Let's see who she believes, you or me. I watched Ethan laugh, my eyes growing colder. He didn't see the child in Victoria's womb as his own at all, just a pawn to marry her, inherit the sterling fortune, and secure a lavish future for himself. And ridiculously, Victoria still treated him like a treasure. I laughed bitterly at myself, feeling a wave of self-pity. Victoria drove up, rolling down the window. Darling, we should go. Ethan waved at me. But Mr. Clark, think it over. If you change your mind, call me any time. Victoria shot me one last cold glance before driving off with Ethan. I could faintly hear their conversation drift back. Darling, what did you say to that bastard? Nothing much. Just told him to give up hope. You'd never marry him because the one you love is me. Of course, the man I love is you, only you. A sarcastic smile touched my lips. What a devoted couple. I wondered if their love would remain just as strong when Victoria finally learned the truth about Ethan. I looked forward to finding out. In the following days, I immersed myself in work while keeping an eye on the Sterling family situation. The Sterling Company had a significant funding gap. Many projects stalled, unable to meet deadlines, facing massive penalties for breach of contract. Victoria's parents frantically tried to borrow money, but the amount needed was substantial, and no one dared to lend to a company in such dire straits. Victoria started making frequent trips to the bank. At first, I assumed she was trying to secure loans to save the company. Later, I learned she was borrowing money personally to fund Ethan's extravagant spending. Because he hadn't been able to marry Victoria, Ethan had been constantly causing trouble, giving her no peace. To appease him, Victoria borrowed heavily, even diverting the company's already scarce liquid funds. Eventually, she had to take out personal bank loans just to keep Ethan quiet temporarily. I didn't think Ethan was stupid. Kicking up a fuss at this point likely meant he was planning one last cash grab before skipping town. But that was none of my business. I wouldn't be warning Victoria out of kindness. What I didn't expect was for Victoria to turn her attention back to me. She came to my office, her face set, her tone stiff. And I was wrong about what happened at the wedding. I apologize. Let's have another wedding. I was stunned. What on earth gave her the confidence to come here and propose marriage again? Did she actually think I still loved her? I chuckled humorlessly. And what about Ethan? And the baby you're carrying? Seeing I hadn't immediately rejected her, a flicker of hope crossed Victoria's eyes. She spoke quickly. We'll have the baby raised somewhere else out of sight. As for Ethan, I'll just tell him to get lost. I've spent enough money on him, he should be satisfied. But didn't you say you loved him most? That you only loved him? I asked, feigning confusion. I was just saying that to appease him, the person I truly love is you, Sincere. Victoria looked at me with feigned depth. Sincere, we grew up together. I know how you feel about me, and deep down I've always loved you too. But as a company president, I face too many temptations, too many men trying to seduce me. Sometimes I just can't control myself. But it'll be different once we're married. Our two companies can merge. With you looking after me, I know I can settle down and love only you, wholeheartedly. Ugh, I felt physically sick. How had I never noticed how utterly shameless and lacking in self-awareness Victoria was? I started clapping softly. Victoria, I have to say you've really broadened my understanding of you. She frowned. What do you mean? As I mean you disgust me. What? Victoria stared in disbelief. Don't understand? Then go back home and think hard about it. I sneered. Victoria looked ready to explode but visibly reined herself in, forcing a smile. Sincere, haven't you always loved me? Wasn't marrying me your lifelong wish? Why are you unwilling now that I want to marry you? Because I don't love you anymore. Every move you make, every interaction with you makes my skin crawl. Victoria's face finally contorted with rage. She sprang up from her chair. Sincere Clark, don't push your luck. If it weren't for the company, do you think I'd come here? That I'd lower myself to say I want to marry you? In my heart, you're not worth a fraction of Ethan. You can't even compare to a single hair on his head. My smile turned mocking. Is that so? Is he really that wonderful? But are you sure he truly loves you, and not just your money? Victoria looked utterly arrogant. Of course, he loves me, Before she could finish her self-absorbed declaration, I pulled out my phone and played the recording. 20 million. Just give me 20 million, and I'll hand Victoria over to you. I'll make her get rid of the baby, too. I'll disappear from your lives forever. Ethan's voice echoed clearly in the office. Victoria paused, then frowned. Where did you get this recording? Shh, don't talk. Keep listening. The recording continued. I never loved her. I only love her money. Can't marry me, can't give me money. Why should I let her boss me around? Sin doesn't trust you. Ethan's words hammered down, one after another. Victoria's face flushed crimson, then turned purple with rage. She started screaming, pacing frantically. Bastard, bastard arg. I'll kill him. I stopped the recording and put my phone away. You thought you could control him, I said mockingly. But you were caught in his scheme from the very beginning. Victoria, you're like a clown, just a laughable spectacle. Assa, Victoria roared, her eyes bloodshot, glaring murderously at me. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I answered lightly, why should I tell you? We have no relationship. Whether you manipulate Ethan or get cheated by him, it has nothing to do with me. So if you hadn't come here today to discuss me, I would never have revealed this recording. Victoria gritted her teeth. Bastard, you're just like him, you're both laughing at me. My voice turned cold. Nobody is laughing at you. You brought this upon yourself. Your vanity, your arrogance, they blinded you. That's why you're here today. Seeing her murderous expression, I smiled faintly. Instead of wasting your time raging at me here, you might want to head home. Ethan might have already skipped town with the money by now. Victoria froze, then dashed out of the office in a panic. I calmly tidied my desk, then picked up my car keys and headed out. Naturally, I was going to watch the show. When I arrived, Victoria was hysterically smashing everything in her apartment, screaming, "Bastard, I'll kill you." Her parents were trying to restrain her, but it was useless. Neighbors whispered that Victoria had stormed back in a fury, couldn't find Ethan, tried calling him frantically, and when the calls wouldn't connect, she started destroying things. No one could calm her down. Wonder what happened. Did Ethan run off? Oh, no way. Wasn't he crazy about Victoria? Love doesn't pay the bills. Look how furious she is. That's probably what happened. Listening to the neighbors' hushed speculation, I thought Ethan was indeed clever. He saw the writing on the wall and got out fast. Any later, and he would have faced Victoria's wrath. Sincere, please talk to Victoria. And Sincere. Victoria's gone mad, please. Help us calm her down, her father. And I can't do anything. Walter and Eleanor Sterling approached me, their faces pleading. I offered a polite smile and refused without mercy. I'm sorry, you've got the wrong person. I can't help you. Just then, Victoria emerged from the kitchen wielding a knife, her face contorted in a terrifying mask of rage. He dared to cheat me, I'll kill you, she shrieked, waving the knife wildly. Everyone who cheats me has to die. The neighbors recoiled in fear. Even I was startled. I hadn't expected the shock to hit her this hard. Victoria, calm down, Eleanor cried, stepping forward to intervene. Victoria slashed wildly, cutting her mother's arm. Quick, call the police, someone shouted in panic. The police arrived and took Victoria away. An ambulance took Eleanor to the hospital. Sigh. Such a fine family. How did it come to this? A neighbor lamented. I smiled coldly. They reaped what they sowed. Later, I heard Victoria continued to be disruptive at the police station, screaming about killing Ethan. The police had her psychologically evaluated, declared her mentally unstable, and committed her to a psychiatric hospital. Eventually, Victoria tried to escape the hospital. She failed, and in the process, lost the baby. She completely broke down after that. During the day, she'd ask anyone she met at the hospital where Ethan was, vowing to kill him. At night, she'd cradle a pillow, rocking it gently, murmuring, "Hush, baby, don't cry. Mommy's here." Her parents, overwhelmed by the series of blows, were both hospitalized. With no family to care for them, they suffered abuse at the hands of hospital orderlies, clothes left unwashed, frequent beatings and verbal abuse, forced to eat leftovers. I felt no pity. Yesterday's causes lead to today's effects. Their family's fate was entirely of their own making. I acquired their failing company, injected capital, and revived it. Business boomed. 2 years later, I became one of the city's most prominent entrepreneurs, admired and respected by all. Online, people called me the city's most eligible bachelor. My future was bright.